Thank you guys for coming out tonight, and I'm just going to take a couple minutes. So many of you have asked and prayed for me as I went to Cuba last week, and I'm grateful for that. I just want to share with you a little bit about what God showed me there and what we did there. So hopefully this will work, but Greg, if this doesn't work, then you're going to forward my slides, okay? So let me share a little bit about the country, because if you're anything like me, go, next slide. You think of just a couple of things when you think of Cuba. You think, I don't know about you, but when I think of Cuba, the first thing I thought of was Fidel. And sure enough, all over the country, and my pictures are a little bit small, but you see markers of the revolution. You see pictures of Fidel. You see pictures of Raul. You see pictures of Che Guevara. You see their logo all over the place, or their motto, where they would say, "Yo soy Fidel." And if you knew about Fidel's death in, I think it was 2014, thousands, tens of thousands lined the streets and were just shouting this out, "Yo soy Fidel, I am Fidel," because Fidel was the marker of the revolution. He was the one that identified with the people. And so Cuba is still a communist country. The thing that changed, if you're aware of this, back 2.5, 3 years ago, was that our country lifted travel restrictions. So now Americans can travel directly from America to Cuba. Canadians have been able to do it for years, right, Len? Because Canadians are just peaceful people, apparently, or something like that. I don't know. But we left on Thursday. Oh, go back one. Let's stay there for a second. We left on Thursday afternoon, and we flew all night. We got there Friday at about noontime, and we went first to the city of Santiago, so you can go to that next slide. Santiago is the place where Fidel Castro is buried. So that's us at the top left at Fidel Castro's grave. We got there just in time for a changing of the guard ceremony. It was everything you would think of in terms of the goose stepping of a sort of communist fascist country, and it was kind of interesting to watch. We spent kind of a day and a half in what I would call a little bit of cultural acquisition. Santiago's the second largest city on the island, 500,000 people or something like that. So we went to this fort that was kind of historic in terms of some of the revolutions they've encountered. And then this picture on the bottom left, we climbed this bell tower, and I got the picture from there. You can't really see, but on the right, there's this incredibly ornate, architecturally significant building, and right next to it is this simpler, just sort of plain building, and that apparently is where Fidel Castro would do a lot of his speeches, because he didn't want to appear pretentious. He wanted to appear to be humble and a man of the people, and so that's what that is. These are some of the activities that when we think of Cuba, we might think of. Lots of baseball fields that we went to, and we ran across a baseball practice here, watched it for about a half an hour or so. Sunday morning we went to the park, and there was a bunch of old Cuban guys playing dominoes. And I don't think it was for money, but maybe it was for money. A bunch of people asked me, "Did you see the old cars?" And yeah, we saw the old cars. They're all over, especially in the bigger cities, of course. We didn't go to Havana. That's not where we traveled. But we did see them, which to us, it's like, oh, that's cool. That's like a 50s Chevy and lots of old Cadillacs and stuff like that. To them, it is a symbol of the economic embargo that's still in place. In fact, quick story, when we were hanging out with the pastor at dinner a couple of nights, he'd have the TV on, and every night there was news about the Americans and how they continue to oppress the Cubans with their unfair embargo. So, yeah, that's how Cubans feel about that. This is the city that we went to in order to do our training. We traveled there on Sunday afternoon. This is our group of trainees, or trainers, I guess. And there, second from the left, is Pastor Alfredo. We were at his church. The city's called Sagua de Tanamo, and it's a town of about 50,000 people, but it feels like the smallest town I've ever been to. It goes back in time, 50, 60 years, because everything that they have was built by the Russians 50 or 60 years ago. And it would have been really nice in the 60s, but it hasn't been upgraded or updated at all since then. This was main mode of transportation in town. If you can see that horse his ribs are sticking out because he doesn't get very much food. Go back to that for just a second. By the way, we traveled on occasion. It was about 90 degrees and probably like 85% humidity. So that was fall in Cuba. And go back still, stay there, don't go. So we would ride these every once in a while. It cost us about 4 cents to ride it to and from, or we could walk the mile or so. But I probably saw about, in this town of 50,000, I probably saw about, I'd estimate in the whole town maybe 50 cars. Because no one had a car, because no one has the money to have a car. So got a chance to teach some in this course. The course is put on by Corbin University. We were invited by Corbin, and there's 2 churches that are sponsoring it, a church in Salem and a church in Hillsboro. And so because of my relationship with some of those guys, they invited me to be part of it. The course is for pastors and church leaders. It's a 6-class training course. So they did a class on how to study the Bible. They did a class on Old Testament, a class on New Testament, a class on preaching and pastoral ministry. Our class was the 5th of 6 classes. It was on systematic theology. And then their final class will be in February, and it's on the pastor's spiritual life. So this is me teaching on the attributes of God. You can read the questions that I wrote up there in Spanish. Actually, someone wrote them for me. This is our translator, Israel. He was from Hillsboro. 65 pastors have been a part of this training course. Probably 40 or 50 of them will actually graduate, quote unquote, with a certificate from Corbin University saying that they've participated in the bulk of the courses. Also during the time I had a chance to preach, so here I am. You guys know me as a pretty noted Pentecostal, right? So here I am preaching in a Pentecostal church, complete with dancing and all sorts of awesome opportunities. I don't know how they liked me, but that's okay. The 2 churches that we were part of, go back for a second, the 2 churches that we were part of were big churches. About 20% of this particular, actually 20% of this particular town is Christian. 20% of Cuba claims to be Christian. So like we were talking this morning, communism, persecution, they haven't really pushed down the church like you might think. These churches were about 300 people. And they told us their schedule. So I took a picture. I didn't include it here, but they had a piece of poster board that invited everyone out to the prayer meeting. The prayer meeting was at 5 a.m. So if you guys want to go to Cuba and go to a prayer meeting at 5 a.m., that's an opportunity. I asked the pastor of the Baptist church that we were at, which was the other picture I was teaching in. I said, what's your typical week of services? And this is what it was. Monday night cell group, Tuesday night prayer meeting, Thursday night Bible study, Saturday night groups, men's, women's, children's, youth, Sunday morning worship service, and Sunday night worship service. So and every meeting, the place was full, and people were joyfully worshiping the Lord, and it was just amazing. The pastor told me that they're going to have an evangelistic meeting in some time in the near future, in the next month or so. And he said they expect, just like we're talking about, people inviting their friends, they expect 475 to 500 people there. So God is doing amazing things in Cuba. I would say one of the challenges they're facing, and this is why we went and did what we did, is that many of the pastors have no formal training. And so they're passionate, they love the Lord, they're excited about the gospel, but some of the theological framework that we need to operate from is not in place for them. And so they were just so grateful for us to be there. I would say there's kind of 2, we mainly worked with Baptist pastors and Pentecostal pastors, and they have a wonderful relationship with one another. But probably the 2 areas of difficulty that they're going to run into are the Baptist pastors are going to veer off towards legalism. I was talking to some of the pastors, what are the things you're facing with your people? And they were talking about some of those exterior things. Well, people are listening to music, and they're affiliating with people who are worldly, and some of those things. And so I'm praying that with the theological framework in place and the biblical theology that we're talking about, that they're going to point people towards the heart of the gospel. For the Pentecostal pastors, we had a Q&A one afternoon, and all they wanted to know about was the supernatural. Well, what do you believe about casting out demons? And what do you believe about the miraculous? And so there's a real there's a real tendency to go into that spiritism and syncretism with supernatural works. And so you can pray for them in that. Go forward. This is where a lot of pastors pastor. This is not a church, but I saw a number of churches like this. This is someone's house, and because they are not as mobile as we are, they don't have 2 cars, let alone 1 car. They can't just hop in their car and drive across town to church. There's churches all over the place, and a lot of these guys that were at our training course would just have a church, and it would be 30 or 40 people in their house, attached to their house, and that was their church, and oftentimes they'll call them missionaries. All right, next one. This is our group, or at least part of our group, the group on that day, and just a joyful time to be with them, and it was really awesome. So what's the future for this? Well, this guy is Leandro. Leandro is he's like the denominational leader for the island. And the first thing that my friends did that are pastors in Salem and Hillsborough is they toured around the entire island, stopped in all these little towns, and said, what's the need? And everywhere they went, every village, every little pueblo asked them, please come here and train us for the gospel. And Leandro led them around the entire island. This particular class from Sagua will graduate in February, and then Leandro is going to take my friend Tim and my friend James, and he's going to take them around the island again, and they're going to look for the next place that they can offer these training courses, and there is no lack of opportunity or places for that. Next slide. This is my friend Jason. In fact, the world's an amazing place, and I'm friends with people in Cuba now, and I just opened up my phone, and Jason just sent me a message. He's the pastor at the church I preached at, and this amazing musician, and got to know him a little bit over the week. Next one is my friend Saul, and Saul's another missionary, pastor, amazing musician. He's 22 years old, and he's part of pastoring a church, and needs to be trained. Part of our group went to his church one night, 30 or 40 people worshiping the Lord, excited about what God was doing. And so these are the guys some of the guys that we met and are part of the training program. Last one, Cuba is just this incredible place. This is from the balcony of the place we stayed at sunset, and it was just amazing. Thank you for praying for me. Thank you for sending me, and just pray for what God is doing. This is part of reaching out every bit as much as the stuff that we do on the ground, and I'm excited to see what happens through our church. I'm excited to see what happens through the church in Cuba. So will you continue to pray with me for that? And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to share more with you. That's just a little taste.